Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Classroom Matters podcast with me, your host, Kristy Houle, where we dive into the hottest topics in education. Today, our guest is Sally Nellson, an award-winning documentary filmmaker who, for 12 years, has been capturing and sharing the stories of what happens every day in public schools, both the joys and the struggles. Having directed and edited more than 100 films, Sally has a deep understanding of how to connect with her subjects and translate that to greater understanding among audiences. Her new initiative is a nationwide movement to end the teacher shortage through a documentary film and impact campaign. Welcome to the show, Sally.
Thank you so much, Kristy. I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you.
Okay, so we're going to dive in, Sally, because Sally and I have sort of been talking like off camera a little bit before, we kind of got the ball rolling here. And everyone, that listens to this podcast, we have a lot of public school teachers. We have a lot of public school administrators. We have all things teacher, on this podcast. It's really what this is aimed for. And what I love so much, Sally, about what you're doing in this conversation is your focus truly is on the teacher and the impact and what's happening in the classrooms with the teacher. And so tell us a little bit about your background and what kind of got you into the work that you're currently doing.
So thank you for asking. I'll make the background really quick. I am from Nebraska. I went to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I moved to Boston because I studied marketing and finance, and I went to work for several big financial services companies. I got to be 30 and I went, okay, that's good. Check that off. I now want to move to Los Angeles and become a producer. So I moved to Los Angeles and I didn't become a producer. Instead, I started my own consulting firm and worked with all the biggest, T. Rowe Price and JP Morgan and Schwab and all the biggest companies. And when I moved back to Nebraska, and my sister called me once and she was teaching journalism at Bellevue East High School. And we were talking about, finances and money and my bonus and whatever. And she said, that's awesome. I'm really proud of you. Can I read you a letter? And she read me a letter from a student. And it kind of hit me. And I thought, I don't think I'm doing anything particularly good for the world. And it doesn't feel great to me. And I want to start to try to redirect my career into something that I love doing and something that helps leave some kind of mark in the world. So I started doing lots of video production and storytelling. And one day we got a phone call at our production studio from a big foundation here in Omaha. And they said, this was in 2011. And I'm sure you remember the front page of every newspaper was, our public schools are failing. And they came to us and said, we invest a lot in Omaha public schools, but we don't really know what's happening in the rest of the state. But we certainly don't think our public schools are failing. How can you help us change that narrative? So we went back to them and said, look, our skill set is video and photography. And I'm a strong believer in, I don't want to do anything that's promotional. I want to do things that are authentic and real and trust an audience to make up their own mind. So we started in early 2012, crisscrossing the state, going into a school for maybe a day, interviewing like 10 people, and then going into classrooms and getting footage of what was actually happening. Then I'd come back and I'd edit a 5 to 10 minute story about the good things that were happening in public schools. And you can see all of those at our website at iloveps.org. But a year into it, I went back to our funder and I said, boy, I don't see anything wrong with the teachers. I don't see anything wrong with the school buildings. What I see is poverty. And I see the impact that poverty has on educators and how schools keep having to spread their arms wider and wider and wider to take care of all of society's issues that walk in the door. So could we start making some films about the issues and the struggles that schools are having so that we can educate? I had no idea. And I would imagine that most of my peers and most citizens across the state don't have any idea either. So we started to create issue-based films, and they have absolutely created change in our state.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to me hearing you say that you would just go into a school, right? This is kind of how that got started. You would go into a school because there's these misconceptions about what's happening from an outsider's perspective, right? We're just thinking our schools are failing, but you would actually go into the school and see what was going on. So what are some things that you like? What are some specific things that you would look for? What are some, and did you ever go into a school where you were like, okay, maybe there aren't some great things going on in here, so maybe we need to pick another school? Like, kind of tell me about that experience of going into a school and what you were looking for and what you would see when you were in those buildings.
So before we would go in, we would do a bunch of research about different programs. We would have people submit ideas. And the first school that we went into is in Omaha. They have this whole engineering wing, and it came out of students wanting to have an opportunity to learn more about engineering and more about STEAM. So they teamed up with, obviously the school and the district teamed up with an architecture firm in Omaha, and they worked together to create this whole new wing with this engineering program. And I walked in, and first of all, it's beautiful. And secondly, you look at these kids doing work that never was possible when I was in school, super advanced, with teachers who really wanted to be hands-on with the kids. It was not lecture. It wasn't, it was experiential. And you could just see these kids blossom. I interviewed them, and the way they talked about their futures, it was something I'd never seen before. One of the things that's very inside baseball that people listening to this podcast will know. We went to a school in South Sioux City, Nebraska, and they have this thing called, oh my gosh, what do you call it? Professional learning communities?
Mm-hmm. PLCs. Yes.
Okay. So couldn't believe this. You see these grade level teachers get together once a week. They talk about every single kid. I watched a 6th grade math group sit together, and they went through question by question a test that they had recently given. And they talked about whether or not this question was getting to what they needed to know. They used data. And I, as a parent, I was so moved by the fact that you cared that much about my kid, that you took a minute to talk about me with other teachers in the school, so that there was an entire team that cared about my learning. It wasn't just me among 30 other people in a class. You cared about us as individuals. And that was striking to me. And I think so many people that I've heard from watched it, and they had no idea either. So those are the kinds of, we had to go to schools where things were visual. So like way back when online learning started, especially in these rural communities that wouldn't have access to like a high level chemistry class, they would have to do basically Zoom. That's not particularly interesting to go in and film that. So we would do more things like, there's a music teacher in a small town that teaches 14 classes a day in a very innovative way. She teaches with basketball. She teaches with jump bands. The way that she teaches rhythm. I mean, I could just go on and on and on to they're all my favorites. I never walked into a school and had a question mark, like, why are we even here? What's happening? It was more like I was being pulled in other directions because there were other things that we should be covering too.
Yeah. So you're talking about all the things that are happening that you're seeing inside of these schools. And I know that we have people listening right now that are in the classroom setting, whether it's a kindergarten classroom all the way up to an honors, high school classroom, shaking their head saying, yes, we're doing these things. We're doing these things. So, you're talking about professional learning communities, and for educators who are listening, and for myself as an educator of 25 plus years I've participated in thousands of PLC meetings and collecting data and all these things. That's normal to us, right? The things that you're talking about. So where is the breakdown, Sally, where we know we're doing these amazing things, but people outside of the school just don't seem to get it, right? Parents may not have the information, they may not know, and unless they're in the building. So why, is it because the teachers aren't sharing those things? Is it because the parents are and society and the community don't know that it's happening? Like, why are we on such different ends of what's happening in schools?
Okay, I'm going to turn that back on you for a second and ask you, how many hours a day did you work?
Well, gosh, I would usually start about 6:37, and I was still usually grading papers until I went to bed, sometimes at sporting events for my kids. So it was just a continuous cycle of thinking about it, working on it all the time. I mean, probably at least 10 hours a day.
And your principals, how many hours a day do you think they were working? Probably the same.
Yeah, probably the same.
And so you didn't have time to really talk to your friends or talk to your extended family. You were entirely focused all day, every day on the children in your class and making sure that they were successful. You might've been talking to their parents, but you didn't have a lot of capacity to do anything else. So how would you have capacity to be getting on Facebook and filming stuff that's happening in your classroom and sharing it with everyone? And just like every single industry, there are acronyms. There are things that happen all the time that we know. Like when I was in finance, I know how all this stuff works. Nobody else does, because that's not what they do for a living. The difference is everybody went to school. So everybody's frame is based on their own experience. So they're like, I've been to school. I know how to do that. Now, I've had several surgeries. I don't know how to do surgery, nor would I ever try to tell a surgeon how to do it. So I think you guys people in schools have a bunker mentality. I think I got to protect what I have right here, because so many people from the outside, whether it's parents, community, the media, are attacking you. So you got to focus on what you have control over. And that's what we tried to do on behalf of educators, is to be able to turn their world out to the rest of the world so that they could see it's not what you experienced. So and people don't care either. We say we care about our kids. We care about our kids. We don't care about our kids. We don't care about the future until, as an employer, it's time to hire someone and you find they don't necessarily have what I need because they haven't been prepared properly, not because the school's not doing their job, but because the school is trying to do 10 jobs when they used to just have one. So long answer, but yeah.
Yeah. So do you also think in that same vein, because as you were talking, I was thinking about, past experiences. And I know I've talked to hundreds of teachers and administrators over the years about these same issues. Do we do care so much. Teachers do truly, genuinely invest in the children in their classroom as if they are their own sometimes. Yes. And do you think that there's a misconception about that, where as a teacher or an administrator, you truly are taking home with you what's going on with those children in the classroom, sometimes even above your own family? And because I can promise you, Sally, when I left my position as an administrator, it was because I was investing way more time in my children and my teachers and my families in my school than I was at home. Do you think that that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that parents and community and society don't really understand the depth of what teachers feel and how much they truly care and how much they're taking home with them at night?
100%. While they expect you to be on 24/7, they don't know that you're on 24/7. It's just, no, they have no idea. They really think as if they were children in the school. I know I show up at 7:50 and I leave at 3:10. I bet my teacher is too. Oh God, if she makes me stay after, we might be there till 4. But then she goes home and she goes out for wine with her friends and she's at her kids' soccer games and she goes to bed at 10 like everybody else does. I think everyone is in their own context, even when they have children in school. They just aren't willing to expand to understand that that little kid in the corner that had a really bad day, you're still thinking about them at night. You're thinking about them over the summer, especially during COVID when you couldn't see them. And you knew that there was probably stuff going on at home, but there's nothing you could do about it. So no, they don't know, which is why Who Taught You is such an important project. Anyway, we'll get to that.
Yeah, I can't wait to get to that, because as we were talking earlier, that's like my favorite thing, the Who Taught You movement. So what are some other misconceptions? So we've talked about one or two, but are there other really big misconceptions that you think are out there that people need to know about?
I think people aren't aware of the enormous influence that mental health has on a kid's ability to be successful, a teacher's ability to be successful, both because of their own trauma related to taking care of kids with trauma. When we did our series on mental health, I was in it all the time. I did all the interviews. I was there filming. This is hours and hours of footage of hearing kids' stories. And I definitely carried that home with me. And it's a fraction of what you guys experience on a regular basis. If that's what you're experiencing every day as an educator, that wears on you. It wears on your system. And so I don't think people understand all of the things that happen at home that keep you from even being able to pay attention in the classroom and cause behavior issues. That how much of your time in 30 minutes, in a 30-minute lesson, how much of your time is spent on behavior management versus actual learning? And it's not a commentary about the educator and whether or not they have skills. It's you're hurting cats. And I don't mean that disrespectfully about kids, but everybody learns differently. It's an individual approach. You have to, everybody thinks about their own space, their own desk, their own experience with the teacher. They don't think about anything else.
Yeah. And so where is this leading us with the teacher shortage? What impact is this having? I know that you work a lot around that, and you do a lot of work, investigating the teacher shortage and the why and the how can we end it? Because we truly are losing a lot of great teachers. I see teachers every day that will call me or that I will talk to that'll say, Kristy, I can't do it anymore. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we are losing an amazing teacher.
It is such a range of reasons. And you know this, some of it is pay, not all of it. Some of it is affordable housing. Some of it is family issues. Some of it really is systemic issues with education. Some of it is leadership in the building. When you have a great principal, everyone on this call knows this. When you have a great principal, you are more likely to have a great school. And I have been in schools in all my time where you had a good principal, but maybe not a great principal, because that sets the culture for the whole building. People don't understand that. So people on the outside, if you're not getting amazing employees, if you're not getting amazing citizens, what's the easiest thing to point at? K-12. It's your fault. We have to blame someone. We're not going to blame politicians. We're not going to blame the system itself. It's easy to point at you and say that it was your fault. So I think we don't have an environment that is particularly attractive, because these days I think it's looked at as, it's almost like going into the Peace Corps. I have to give up everything in my life to go serve, not get paid very much, and get blamed. So like a social worker I think in some ways a similar position. They're confronted with, I don't think it can be a particularly rewarding job. As a filmmaker, that doesn't look like anything I would want to do. But the people that I see that do it are in it because they love kids and they want to take care of kids and families. But I don't sense that they get the attacks from the outside that educators do. So, and when you're judged, when you think you want to be a teacher, and you're kind of patted on the head, oh, that's sweet. 8 to 3, summer's off. That's so great, because we don't see teachers as people. You don't have a life outside of school. You're not allowed to be thought of as someone with an entire life. You're just thought of as a teacher. So I think there are just so many misperceptions about your humanity.
Wow, that's a really good way to put it. And you talked about just the fracture in the system of education. And so do you think that sometimes teachers are, listen, I know for a fact that teachers are doing things that are completely out of their control. When you're talking about all of the overwhelming pieces of assessment for, federal funds and all of the curriculum and the pacing and all these things that potentially teachers really don't truly believe in, but because of the system, they're being forced to do certain things in a certain way, even though they don't agree with it. So do you think that's another misconception, that parents don't realize that, hey, the teachers really actually feel like I do, but they have to keep their job, so they have to do what they're told to do?
100%. I was talking with a professor in a teacher prep program, and they were talking about a student of theirs who was out doing a practicum, and he was giving a history class, and he was doing a PowerPoint for a history lesson. And this professor said, I'm trying to teach my kids to be creative and be critical thinkers. I almost feel like what I'm doing is unethical, because I am preparing kids for a world that doesn't exist, that no longer exists. What I hear from educators over and over again is, when you ask them, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about education, what would it be? Never pay. Right. Pay is never the first thing they say. The first thing they say is assessments. And they agree, we do need to measure how well our kids are doing, but it allows for so little creativity, and doesn't allow you to be the great teachers that you can be, because you don't have the resources that you need to be successful. And parents, no one gets that. Yeah.
So let's kind of switch gears, because I really want to get into some of the work that you're doing and some of the projects that you're working on. And I want to kind of gear over to the Who Taught Me movement. So tell the audience a little bit about that and what that work actually looks like.
So early last year, we decided that we wanted to start working on looking at the educator shortage. And when we do research, we do it with cameras, because I always think, oh, I might use that conversation. So we went out to professional development in a smaller community, and there were, 250 educators there. And we set up a room and asked people to sign up to come back and just talk to us. So during the day, we had 9 people, and it's supposed to be like 15 minutes, but I have no way of doing that because I'm so curious. I kept everyone for like an hour. So I sat down and I asked them, why did you choose this career? And tell me some of your greatest memories of it, and what do you love about it? And then what do you struggle with? And no one ever complained about anything, never. And there was a lot of crying, and you could see the passion that they have for the job. So I get that. Then the next 2 days we spent following an elementary principal in a small town that had I think they were a Title I school, because I wanted to see if the teacher shortage was visible. Like I said earlier, I can't film something that's not visual. And just talking heads is not particularly interesting. So we followed her everywhere. We followed her in the car as she went over for a home visit, because parents just couldn't get up to drive their little girl to school. And you could see all of the aides for the special ed teachers had to be pulled to cover classes.
Mm-hmm.
So we just kept seeing this strain on the system. And we made a few clips, and they were of the teachers crying. And we met with the dean of the College of Education and Human Sciences at University of Nebraska, Omaha. And she's like, yeah, this is great. This does absolutely nothing to make the education profession look like a profession. Mm-hmm. Showing a bunch of teachers crying isn't the right way to go. So I took that to heart, and I thought, there are systemic issues in education. What we can do, as proven by the I Love Public Schools project, is we can tell stories that can change the way people see the profession. That's what I can do. I can't fix pay. I can't fix standardized testing. I'm not qualified for that. But what I can do is shine the spotlight on how great teachers are. So then I got to thinking about, what do we all have in common? We all went to school. Even if it was a homeschool, we all have been educated. And I would say the vast majority of people can name at least one person, even if they don't remember their name. They can remember one thing from their education that had an impact in their lives. Mm-hmm. And so I would ask you, Kristy, you told me a wonderful story a little bit ago about a child you had, mm-hmm. 20 years ago. But can you name someone that was influential in your life, an educator, a coach, principal, counselor that made a difference for you?
Oh, for sure. I can tell you that Mr. Bueller, my biology teacher in high school, was by far just the most amazing, supportive, generous human being as a teacher. And I loved going to his class. He just was, sort of had a way of just making everything fun, and the kids all loved him. And yeah, I could probably name a couple other when I was younger, but he definitely has always been sort of one of my favorites. And, I never planned on being a teacher. And so that, it kind of came about weirdly, because I wasn't even the best student, surprisingly enough. But, looking back at some of my teachers, I know that they had an impact on what I ended up doing in my life. And so for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So when you were talking about Mr. Bueller, I mm-hmm. saw your body language change. I saw you light up. And I wonder, how did it feel for you what were the feelings that came up for you when you were telling that story?
Mm-hmm. It almost makes you emotional, right? Because I haven't talked about it for a really long time. But, I think just having someone that made you feel important and made you feel seen. And sure, he taught me a lot of great stuff about biology, and we went on some cool trips and did some spelunking, and he was always kind of the fun teacher. So that piece was there too. But I think I just had a feeling of love and value and importance and warmth and, being seen, when maybe you don't feel like that, especially when you're a school age child. And it was more about just the work. It was about me as a person when you were in his class. And so that's kind of some of the feeling and emotion that gets brought up is I don't think kids get that in the moment until later when they're removed from it. And then they look back.
So imagine that you are at Thanksgiving. And you've got 25 people around the table, and people fear Thanksgiving, family dynamics yes. and whatever. But imagine if you went around the table and you asked everyone to tell a story about an educator that made a difference in their lives. I think you would see, almost like being at a football stadium when people do the wave, you would see this emotion spread throughout the table. Now, imagine when everybody goes home, what has been created is this swell of gratitude mm-hmm. and of perceiving educators in a different way. Perceiving educators as, oh my gosh, I didn't get here all by myself. None of us got here by ourselves. So I kept thinking, what if we could get to influential, successful, probably wealthy individuals who might have the ear of politicians and ask them that question? So I always come back to, I'd love to hear from the CEO of JP Morgan.
Yeah.
Tell me a story about an educator. And if he's telling one, and the CEO of Schwab is telling one, and Starbucks and entertainers and professional athletes and heads of nonprofits, imagine what that does in our society. It just creates this collective consciousness of positivity toward educators. Mm-hmm. I can do that. We can do that together. So I thought of the question, who taught you? And people see that question. I've had a few people, we put out some merch early on, and the friends that I have that wear them tell me all the time that people come up to them and say, oh my gosh. And you start to tell a story, and then it's mm-hmm. Oh, let me tell you about this teacher. So imagine, like, we put so much negativity into the world, but when you're asked to talk about you and your own experience in your life, it feels good. And I think it spreads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm thinking about something as you're speaking, and I want to bring this up for everybody that's listening. There are so many other people that work in a public school setting outside of just a classroom teacher. And I was thinking about this as you were talking, because I have 3 teenage boys. One just graduated from high school last year. I'm very sad because I'm starting to realize that eventually I'm going to be by myself and my children will be gone.
Yes.
And you know what? Every time I've asked him about his teachers, because, we talk to our kids about their teachers, it wasn't an actual teacher for him. It was a support staff person mm-hmm. that was in the building that wasn't necessarily a classroom teacher, but it was definitely someone that was in the public school setting with him every day that made him feel loved and warm and welcomed in a relationship that, so there are other people that are in the setting that aren't the classroom teacher that are also there building these long-lasting relationships with children.
I agree with you 110%. And that's what we've heard over and over again. It's not just about teachers. And I know you got to connect with a word that people know. But even my story is about my basketball coach. Yeah, he was a classroom teacher, but I didn't love him because of his class. I loved him because he taught me how to work hard and just rub dirt on it, just keep going and push yourself. So we talked to a custodian not too long ago, and he shared a story about a girl that he would see every day in the hallway, and he would always go out of his way to say hi because he was just a friendly guy. And he sensed that there was something going on there. And one day the child went up to him and said, why are you always so nice to me? Thank you. That feels really good. This is a custodian. Then there's the lunch lady that sneaks a kid some food that they know needs some. 110%. It's the counselors. It's our third episode in the mental health series focuses on the student services coordinator, who a lot of kids don't even know that she exists, but she's the food bank and she's the interface with social work. And then the school resource officer, who they've gotten a bad rap, but this guy wears a uniform, but he does not police the hallways. He loves kids deeply, and he is there to help them be successful and to protect them. So it is everyone, every single person that works in a building, not just teachers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how can people, kind of wrapping this up, how can people find out more about this? How can, show their support for schools and educators? What are small things if people are listening right now? I mean, obviously, we have a lot of teachers, but we do have a lot of homeschool parents. We have a lot of other folks that just listen to this podcast that might not even be in a public school. How can we start making small changes or showing support for our schools and our educators in a positive way?
There are 3 things, and it's really, really simple. If you go to the website, whotaughtyou.org, you can, I think the tab says get involved. Mm-hmm. The first thing is share a story. And you can either record audio, you could write something, or our preference is get out your phone and just tell a 2-minute story about an educator. And it's really easy to upload it on our site. And then we review all of them, and then we begin to share them in social media. The second thing is, if you would like to make a donation, we have a vehicle called the Honor Roll. And if you want to recognize a teacher in a permanent way, you can donate $25, give us the teacher's name, the educator, the coach, the counselor, principal, and they'll end up on our website. If you donate $50, their name will also appear in the film credits. Now you can donate a whole lot more. But those are two ways to get involved. The third one is to go to the shop and look at our merchandise, because I just want that question to be out there, because even if no one says anything, they see it and it sparks a memory for them. So those are three: tell your story, donate money to the Honor Roll, and buy some merch and wear it and start conversations.
Yeah. So, I could not be more delighted that I know you and that we've had this conversation. And it really is so refreshing, because we obviously we deal with a lot of, like negativity, and like these terrible things that are happening in the public schools. And, that's so much more common, unfortunately, than the refreshing and the positives. And like, it's not all that bad. You have to just look more inside. And it takes effort to do that. And so I truly applaud you for the work that you're doing. I'm definitely a fan and supportive. And I think we need to spread more of this and less of the negativity. And hopefully this conversation will get out there and at least do a little bit more. And we, for everybody listening, we will have all of Sally's information and where you can record your story, where you can get your merch, where you can get involved and make donations and talk about, who taught you in the podcast description. So you don't need to worry about stopping to write any of this down. We will put that out there for you. And Sally, thank you so much. I would love to have you back on the show. Maybe, beginning of next year, kind of see what kind of work you're doing and just really keep up with the efforts that you're putting into this amazing initiative.
Well, thank you so much, Kristy. And we also are doing a documentary film series, and I would love to come back and talk to you about that, because it does address this negativity and how do we better understand why people think what they think, and how do we change that, and how do we help them better understand. And the last plug I will say is for all the principals in the room and all the teachers that are responsible for career day. In high school, when you have career day, bring in a kindergarten teacher.
Oh, yes.
You got to sell your own profession. And I think as kids get older, they need to be reminded of the warmth and the love that they felt from those teachers when they were little. So as much as your jobs are difficult, you got to sell it.
Yeah. Wow. What a great idea.
So, and also to any homeschool parents, charter school parents, private school parents, and teachers. I could be a teacher in a Catholic school today and be in a public school tomorrow. It doesn't matter. Anyone that gives their careers to serve our next generation deserves and needs to be recognized. So there you go. Thank you, Kristy, so much.
Love
and if
it.
anyone has any questions, please email me. I love to hear about what's happening in your area, because this documentary film, we're going several places to see what education looks like. Florida, Texas, Arizona, and Philadelphia. So if you have thoughts and ideas, and if the LAUSD teachers go on strike tomorrow, we're going. We're heading out there to film. So yeah. Anyway, that's it.
We're going to keep up with you. We're going to keep up. You need to make a pit stop in Missouri.
I would love to.
Come see us.
Love to. Well, thank you so much, Kristy, and I appreciate your work. And thank you to everyone who does what you do all day, every day.
Yeah. Thank you, Sally. And this is Kristy Houle signing off for this episode of the Classroom Matters podcast. And don't forget to check out all of our great resources on the Educate.Today website.